In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to maximize your chances of landing a high-paying software engineering job. You see, there are several stages to landing a job in software, and with the amount of competition for tech jobs these days, making a good first impression is crucial. That's why we're going to cover the 3 most important topics you need to know to increase your chances of landing a tech job. The first topic is how to write a good resume. The second, how to get job interviews. And number 3 is how to prepare and ace your coding interviews. Now, while I can't guarantee that you'll get a job, I'm confident that with my 5 years of industry experience and having undergone the interview process countless times, you'll come away with actionable tips you can use in your next job hunt. These are the exact tips I've used to help several engineers with their job search, from CS grads, bootcamp grads, and self-taught developers. This is going to be more of a long-form video filled with useful advice. So if you'd like to see more videos like this from me in the future, then consider subscribing to my channel. And make sure to like the video too. That helps with the YouTube algorithm. Alright, so let's dive into the first topic, which is how to write a good resume. Now, I want to preface this by saying that while a resume is very important, I feel people place too much of an emphasis on it. At the end of the day, a resume is just a means to get past the initial screening phase, so you can get to the interview. That being said, there is a general format you can follow that has seen a lot of success for many others, including me. First things first, keep it simple. Your resume should fit on 1 page, not 2, not front and back, just 1 page. As for formatting, you want to start with the contact details, things like your name, email address, and phone number. You can also consider adding your LinkedIn profile or GitHub link. This is useful as LinkedIn and GitHub are commonly seen as extensions of your resume that can give recruiters and hiring managers more insight into your skills. Since most resumes are sent digitally, having a link to either of these can prove helpful. The next section depends on your experience. If you're new, then I'd say lead with your education first, otherwise jump straight into your work experience. The reason for this is the more experienced you are, the less your education matters. Either way, it's up to you. In the case of education, just list where you went to school and the academic accomplishments and coursework that you received at that school or institution. If you went to a coding bootcamp, this would be the place to put that information too. In terms of GPA, you only want to include it if it makes you look good. So if your GPA is like a 3.3 or higher, include it, otherwise just leave it out. The next section is technical skills. This is where you'd mention any programming languages, frameworks, databases, or tools you have experience in. This is pretty self-explanatory. You want whoever is reading your resume to know what skills you can offer. This helps them gauge your readiness for the job, whether you're already familiar with the desired skills, or if you might need some onboarding. Alternatively, you can put the technical skills at the bottom of your resume. I do this for most of my resumes and have had no issues. But again, it's up to you. The next section is going to be your experience. Here you want to list any past work or internship experience. The goal is to have at least 2 or 3 bullet points for each past role describing technical challenges and your contributions to the project. The format I typically follow for each bullet point is I accomplished X by doing Y, resulting in Z. An example would be I enhanced the efficiency of our data retrieval system by implementing a streamlined algorithm that reduced processing time by 30%, resulting in a more responsive and agile system. Something like that clearly and succinctly explains your contribution. And you want to keep these bullet points brief to keep your resume skimmable. If someone needs more information about a point, then they will ask you to elaborate. In any case, another thing I want to highlight here is how I use data in my point. I said the algorithm reduced the processing time by 30%. Using data makes your accomplishments seem a lot more impactful than if you didn't use them at all. This also helps whoever is looking at your resume gauge the impact you made as well. Keep in mind that not every point needs to have this, so don't overdo it. Now, if you're a student in university, bootcamp, or even self-taught, you probably don't have a lot of work experience, and that's okay. In that case, I recommend listing your school or personal projects in the experience section. In fact, this is the strategy I used as a self-taught developer when I first started applying to jobs. The thing is, any projects you list should be compelling. To make a project more impressive, you need to focus on developing full-stack projects that are deployed onto the web. You want to try and mimic a real-world project as much as possible. This means try to move beyond a project that only runs on your machine. You want something that has a front end and a back end and is deployed using something like Heroku, Google Cloud, or AWS. If you're building mobile apps, then the Apple App Store or Google Play should be your goal. You want the project to be something that can be seen and used by other people. And it doesn't matter what these projects are. I feel people get too hung up on what the best projects to build are and end up never doing anything. Instead, find something that interests you and see how you can make a web app, mobile app, script, or tool with it. The last thing I want to talk about when it comes to resumes is that sometimes even the best formatted resumes will still end up in a black hole, never to see the light of day. And that's because a lot of companies use something called ATS, or Applicant Tracking System. This is software that companies use to filter out thousands of resumes to only show the most relevant to their recruiters. So what can we do about ATS? Well, it all comes down to keywords. This is why it's super important that you tailor each resume you write to the job you're applying to. You can just modify your resume to contain some of the keywords in the job posting. For example, if you're applying to a full stack web developer job and they're looking for someone with experience in, let's say, Next.js, Vercel, and TypeScript, then make sure to include those somewhere on your resume. You can put them in your skills section, or if you have a short intro on your resume, you can modify it to something like, I'm a web developer with X years of experience in TypeScript, or something like that. The key is to put the keywords and the job posting on your resume to make yourself more relevant to the position. Also, don't lie on your resume. That will backfire on you. Alright, that's it for section 1. Now let's move on to section 2, which is how to get job interviews. It's no secret that the tech job market is really bad right now, with layoffs from big companies seemingly happening every week. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, it's tough to get a job right now, but it's not impossible. You just need to change your expectations and your approach a little bit. The thing is, if your dream is to get into one of the big tech companies like Google, Microsoft, Apple, and similar, it's going to be much harder to do nowadays because these are the exact companies that are cutting back right now. To be fair, I see this as a temporary thing, and in the long run, things will go back to normal. In any case, if I was looking for a job right now, I'd shift my focus over to smaller companies like startups, because despite the market downturn, there are still a bunch of startups getting investments and trying to grow their teams right now. The same goes for mid-sized companies and consulting companies, which likely aren't cutting back as much on workers as the big companies are. So if I was job hunting right now, those are the types of companies I would be looking at. Regardless, this doesn't mean you should completely avoid big companies. If your dream is to work at Google, then go ahead and apply. The thing is, there are many ways to get a job, and you might be surprised that some people get jobs without applying directly to job postings. One of the best ways to find jobs is to leverage your network. That's why sites like LinkedIn are crucial to have if you're a software engineer. One of the easiest ways to start networking is to search for people with shared interests, mutual connections, or former colleagues from work, school, or a coding bootcamp. The idea here is to connect with these people and introduce yourself, asking them for a referral to a hiring manager or a decision maker at their company. To get the most out of this, you need to reach out to a lot of people, most of whom you won't know, and that's okay. It might seem jarring at first to connect with a bunch of random people, but this is the most basic form of networking. The worst anyone can say is no, so don't be afraid to do this. Just avoid writing generic messages, introduce yourself, and make sure to add a little personality to your messages. Maybe mention something about a shared interest you have, or if you're both alumni from the same school. Everyone has received copy and paste messages before at some point, and those usually get ignored. But if you take time to craft personalized introductions, it's more likely that the recipient will respond. Another thing I used to do was to find recruiters and connect with them directly. For example, I wanted to work at Google, so I typed in technical recruiter Google Seattle and found a list of recruiters working at Google. I picked the ones that seemed the most relevant to me and sent them a message saying, "Hey, I'm Matt. I'm interested in hearing if you have any iOS positions at Google right now. Here's my resume so you can see if I'm a good fit or not. Thanks." The reason why this works is because you just did half of the recruiter's job for them. So of course they're going to be happy to help you out. And if for whatever reason they can't, they will usually follow up with you to let you know ahead of time if there are any openings. I've used this strategy with great results throughout my career, so I highly recommend you do it too. Another strategy you can use is to actively engage with industry relevant content on LinkedIn. This means following influential people, companies, and groups within the tech community. Make sure to engage and share content that resonates with you. By participating in discussions and sharing your perspectives, you not only showcase your knowledge and expertise, but also increase your visibility among other industry professionals. Doing this could eventually lead to hidden job opportunities in your network, but this involves taking the time to nurture your connections. And if all else fails, don't hesitate to take a proactive approach by cold emailing companies directly. I'd go so far as to say that cold emailing is one of the most underrated ways to network yourself into a job. Start by thoroughly researching the company, its culture, and its current projects. Identify the right contact person, such as a hiring manager or recruiter, and personalize your email accordingly. You can even visit a company's website and check their contact us section for an email and try that. Clearly articulate why you're interested in the company and how your skills and experiences align with their needs. Offer specific examples or insights that demonstrate your value proposition and enthusiasm for the opportunity in your email. The key is to be persistent, as one email will likely go unnoticed. So make sure to follow up on your emails, just try not to be annoying. And if for whatever reason they're not hiring for a full-time position, you can ask about available internships, and if it's possible to go full-time after the internship. This is a simple trick you can use to find other potential opportunities for yourself at a company. And finally, the last thing I want to talk about for this section is an in-person strategy you can use. This involves going to tech conferences. Some tech conferences out there are Grace Hopper, South by Southwest, and Microsoft Ignite, to name a few. The thing about Grace Hopper is that it's meant for women in tech, but recently there have been men finding their way in there, so if you're a dude, I guess that's an option for you. In any case, I encourage you to do your research, as there are hundreds of tech conferences out there and they usually have companies there interviewing candidates for jobs. Okay, so that's going to do it for section 2. Now let's move on to the final section where we're going to talk about how to prepare and ace your coding interviews. Now, if I'm being honest, I hate coding interviews just as much as the next guy, but these are what most tech companies are doing to interview their candidates, and it's kind of unavoidable at this point. I will say algorithm type questions are more common at big companies, but in my experience, smaller to mid-sized companies like startups are usually more informal and instead offer take-home projects. Whatever the case, the only way to get better at coding interviews is to just practice. The most common method is to go to platforms like LeetCode and HackerRank and start doing problems. I would recommend you start doing 1 to 2 problems daily. At first, just do the easy problems, but then slowly start to introduce medium and hard problems when you feel more confident. It's also crucial to be self-aware of your strengths and weaknesses. For example, maybe you're good at array and string problems, but suck at dynamic programming. You then allocate more time to dynamic programming type problems. Being self-aware allows you to study with a plan and makes sure you're a more well-rounded candidate, and that you're not just solving questions to solve questions. It's also important to start interview prepping weeks before you plan on looking for jobs. Do not try prepping while you're job hunting. That just makes things more stressful and leaves you less prepared overall. One thing I like to do personally is to time myself. I do this to try and mimic the interview setting as much as possible. In a real coding interview, you have at most 1 hour to come up with a solution. So struggling with a medium question for 2 hours isn't a realistic way to prepare. My general rule of thumb is to spend 30 to 45 minutes on easy questions and 45 minutes to 1 hour on medium and hard questions. Any longer and I stop what I'm doing and just look at the solution. You have to force yourself to think under a time constraint. It'll train you better for a real interview. So once you pass the time limit, look at the solution, understand it as best you can, and come back to the problem later. Another thing that works for me is to voice my thought process out loud. You'd be surprised at how much this helps. There is just something about actively voicing your thoughts that helps you think about the problem on a deeper level. In any case, you're expected to voice your thoughts out loud in a coding interview anyway, so this is good practice. But basically, when it comes to studying, just do a refresher on data structures and Big O, and just practice a wide variety of problems. However, I would concentrate your focus on string, array, hash table, trees, and graph problems, as those are the most commonly asked question types in interviews. And finally, one mistake I see people making all the time is focusing only on the coding portion of the interview. Most people neglect behavioral questions, and in pretty much every coding interview I've ever been on, there were at least a couple of behavioral questions asked. One reason why I think people overlook this is that they don't know how to prepare for these types of questions, since you never know what you'll be asked. But I'm here to tell you that there is a strategy you can use. First, start by collecting your experiences and compiling stories that fit into 3 categories, which are technical, success, and leadership. To give you a quick rundown on each category, we first have technical, which covers the technical challenges you faced in your past projects. The goal of these types of questions is to see how you handle tough technical problems and your thought process behind them. Then we have success type questions, basically stories around how you succeeded. For example, the story behind a promotion, how you scaled an app to thousands of users, or really any story that showcases something you were successful in. The third category is leadership, which, as you might have guessed, is about how you're able to take charge and lead by example. This one is crucial because employers want to know that you can be a leader and not just someone who follows orders. Pretty much most of the behavioral questions you'll encounter will fit into one of these categories. Try to have at least 2 stories or experiences for each category. The reason for this is that a lot of people tend to freeze up when asked behavioral questions because their minds are racing to come up with a story on the spot. And when you do something under pressure without any practice, the results tend to be disappointing. Having your experiences ready to go at the top of your head lets you pick and choose ones that fit the given question best. So you no longer need to panic as you've already done the prep work ahead of time. But compiling a few stories is not enough. A story is only as good as its storyteller. To make an impression with your interviewer, you need to tell compelling stories. So after collecting your experiences in the 3 categories I just mentioned, you need to practice telling these stories. Luckily, there is a proven storytelling format you can follow for job interviews. It's called the STAR format. Now, the STAR format is pretty straightforward. It's an acronym that stands for situation, task, action, and result. I suggest you Google the STAR format and find examples of how it's used so you can get a better idea of how to apply it to your responses. Once you understand how it works, find a list of common behavioral questions online. I'll link one in the description below, and just start practicing how you would respond to random questions following the STAR format using the stories you collected. I found this to be one of the best ways to practice for behavioral interviews, and it's helped significantly reduce my anxiety around those types of questions. One last tip I can give for behavioral questions is to have a rehearsed answer for the question, "Tell me about yourself." That question is pretty much guaranteed to be asked during an interview. Now, for this question, you don't need to follow the STAR format as it's just about getting to know you better. But you want to keep it brief and only mention relevant skills for the job you're applying to. For this question, keep the format present, past, and future in mind. Basically, talk about what you're doing currently and the years of experience you have doing it. Then mention what you did in the past. Remember, only to mention relevant things. And then finally, end off with what you're looking for in a future role. Here's an example. I'm currently an iOS developer with 5 years of experience, specializing in Swift development. In my current role, I focus on creating robust and user-friendly mobile applications while collaborating with cross-functional teams. Previously, I've worked with startups where I've gained expertise in React Native development. This experience allowed me to lead projects from conception to deployment, emphasizing adaptability and agile methodologies. Looking forward, I am seeking a role where I can continuously innovate using the latest iOS technologies. I am passionate about staying updated with industry trends and contributing my expertise to develop cutting-edge applications. That's the gist of how your response should sound. And remember to keep it to about 30 seconds to 1 minute max. I suggest you practice answering this question in front of a mirror and trying to memorize your response. It needs to be like muscle memory. When somebody asks, "Tell me about yourself," you need to be able to give your response on the spot. Anyway, that's pretty much it for behavioral interviews. But if you're looking for more training on how to prep for your interviews, then I suggest you check out TechInterviews.io. We are the most comprehensive coding interview prep platform on the market. If you want to get better at solving algorithm questions, we teach you the underlying patterns and techniques, which will not only improve your problem-solving ability, but also cut down on your prep time. We also have an in-depth training for behavioral questions where you can learn more strategies to improve your skills in this area. We even cover data structures, salary negotiation, and much more. So if you're looking for an all-in-one solution, then head on over to techinterviews.io and try the free content on there completely risk-free. Just sign up and see for yourself. By following the advice in this video, I'm confident that you will eventually land a high-paying tech job for yourself. Now, I've mentioned this before, but for about a year or so, it's been increasingly difficult to get a tech job. With so many layoffs happening, it's easy for candidates to lose hope. You see, I struggled with breaking into the tech industry several years ago, and I've learned a few things that will help you stay more motivated while job hunting, which is why I know this video will help you out. So if you're looking to learn from my experiences, then do me a favor and check out this video right now. In any case, that's going to do it for this video. Hope you learned something new, and I'll see you in the next one.